Well, welcome once again to ArtBreak, everyone. This is the first of several programs we'll be having featuring artists in this year's West Michigan Area Show. And we're going to start out with Jeffrey Bohl, who is a sculptor and has a piece entitled Ellie in the exhibition. If I'm not, Ellie?
Ellie.
Ellie, okay,
Ellie
good.
the elephant.
Ellie the elephant, yes. So a little bit about Jeff. His professional life has mostly been in education, primarily as a math teacher, but he has also worked as an administrator in such capacities. He's currently teaching high school mathematics at Coldwater High School. It's one of several places he's taught. And even though, as he says, he loves teaching, he has always had a passion for art and was drawn to sculpture, I think, because of the three-dimensional aspect, and also another aspect of his career as a tool design engineer. He made injection molds for commercial use, and so the mold kind of got started. And this led him to bronze casting, which he's been doing for about the past 25 years. And he'll be showing you about the technique later on, which is quite fascinating. He's created a very distinct body of work, and I think the first thing usually you see it, there's a kind of this whimsical, fanciful aspect to it. But at the same time, underneath it, what makes it this humorous and whimsical is that there's a really sophisticated and imaginative use of sculptural forms and a variety of textures that really all come together to really make these pieces work, I think, in a very special way. And in a way, as you look at them, I think they're going to go back to sculpture as a kind of magic, which is where it began, really making various ritual things. And here they are, and I think they have some of those overtones, but are very playful as well. So please welcome Jeffrey Bohl.
Thank you. Sculpture as magic. And, I guess that's the way I experience it. I have never put that word on it. Thank you. The process for me is magical, and it's about creating in the moment. As I talk a little bit more about my processes, I think that that will become apparent. I've got a little bit too much content to work through, and we can get through all of it or not all of it. However it works out, I can flex. I'm a teacher, so whatever. This is the classroom for the day. Please don't hesitate to raise your hand if you've got questions. I want to make sure that everyone understands there's a lot of complicated things involved in making bronzes, so please shoot your hand up. And if I'm paying attention up here, somebody just say, hey, Jeff, stop for a second. I've got a question. All right. So I want to show you just some examples of my artwork. I've got a few up here. These are all, there are 4 sculptures depicted there. So for the first few slides, there's a piece of the whole sculpture and then a detail. I have in the last 5 years or 7 years introduced a lot more whimsy into my art. I really, if we go back here for just a second, this was at the Public Museum, on the front lawn of the Public Museum at Art Prize in Grand Rapids. And I had the opportunity to play artist for a little bit and stand up there and watch, especially children, come up and interact with the pieces and be just kind of awed by it and delighted by it. And so that was an important turning point for me, because I have been trying to be a little bit more whimsical in my work since then. Some pieces are figurative, some pieces are animal-like. The scales are very different. That flower on the right there is 5.5 inches tall. That's as small as I've ever worked. I'm working on some other pieces. Well, you can see the green sculpture here is about 2 feet tall. It's on the front there. again, a few animals. This is my second elephant. The first elephant I ever did, it was commissioned by some friends. It's out in the gallery there with a couple other animals. There's a totally abstract piece, the second one from the right. I do love to do strictly abstract work. Seems like people don't get as excited about that as I get about it, so I don't do a whole lot of it. But these are older works. A couple of those are pieces that were at Art Prize. These are of various scale. The one on the left and the one on the right are 4 feet tall. The big one with the hair is 3 feet tall. So these are pretty massive pieces. And so those are mostly people-ish. These are mostly animal-ish. And again, the scale is very different. The bird on the bottom, second from the right, is about 8 inches, maybe 10 inches tall. And the bull there is about 3.5 feet tall. Thank you very much for the introduction. I don't need to go in a whole lot of this. I have been married for, I better get this right. Ann's going to be watching this, 34 years. And very happily to my partner, Ann. If without her, I wouldn't be able to do any of this work. And I am the father of 3 adult children. My former work as a tooling designer was really impactful for me because when you're making things like that, it's all 3D. And so when I first learned or worked on my first 3-dimensional CAD system, I had been drafting on flat surface and trying to depict 3-dimensional things in 2D. When I first worked on my first 3-dimensional CAD system, it was kind of like I got my second leg. It was really an eye-opening kind of experience for me. And I worked in that industry for about 8 years and fell in love with the idea of mold making. And so I actually learned to pour bronze here. The Kalamazoo Institute of Arts has been impactful for me. When I was making molds for plastic injection for plastic pieces for cars and computers, I heard that they had a mold making for sculptors class here. It was taught by Paul Flickinger. I don't know how many of you would know Paul, but I took that class and then took several sculpting classes with him after that. And it's really because of my experiences here that I'm doing what I do. He taught me how to pour bronze. I used the equipment here as a model for equipment that I made myself with some family and friends. I actually made a bronze foundry furnace and a burnout kiln. I'll show you pictures of those. Up until the last couple of years, I have poured all my own bronzes in my backyard, which is not something that most bronze sculptors do. They're too busy making art maybe, and they don't want to do all the detail work, but most people who make bronzes don't do a lot of messing with the bronze. I have a friend who owns a bronze foundry, and artists they bring him something that's clay or plaster, and then they pay him to make a bronze copy of it, which is great. It is beautiful work, but I really love the making it part of it. So I love working with metal. I love the heat that's involved in bronze casting. I love the heat that's involved in working with wax, and all that stuff will show up as we work through this. So one story I want to tell about Paul and the KIA, this is a real pivotal moment for me in my development as an artist. When I came here first and started taking sculpting classes, my work was super tight. I didn't use many textures. I was super anal, and I would spend 2 hours in class working on one curve transition between 2 different forms on a piece, and it was driving Paul crazy. And so in retrospect, I don't know if he did this on purpose or not, but I was working on a piece in clay, and it was kind of modestly dry clay piece about this tall. And he came by and jostled the sculpting stand, and the piece fell on the floor. And I was like, I just spent 3 hours on that curve, whatever. And he looks at it. He didn't even, I'm sorry, Jeff. And he leans down like this, picks these 5 pieces up, the legs, the torso and head and the arms, 5 different pieces. Puts the legs on the pedestal, jams the torso on, and sticks the arms on. He steps back and he goes, looks better already. And then he walked away. And honestly, it was devastating for me. And it pissed me off, pardon my French, because he was right. It did look better. It had energy it didn't have before. It had an emotion that it didn't have before. It was intriguing. And what I had been making was in no way intriguing. And just in that, picking pieces up and sticking them together randomly, really, that's what I do with my work. And again, I'll show you some pictures of that, but my work is very much akin to assemblage sculpture. So you've all seen the crazy welder guy who goes to the junkyard and sticks stuff together, puts it in his front yard. Oh, that's cool. Well, that's what I do, except I make the forms. I don't go to the junkyard to get them. I make random shapes in my studio, and I've got a huge pile of them that I work with. And so I make them with no idea what they're going to be. And then I have a libation or two some Friday evening and go, stick them together and see what moves me, right? So these are, I've got a few pictures of my bone pile, but I'll actually take you on a video tour of the studio. I was hoping to come in and use a bunch of torches and soldering irons and do a demonstration, but they said they couldn't do that here. So I've got some video that will serve as a demonstration to show you a little bit about how I work. So these are some of the random forms that I make. They're different in scale. Ones in the lower right are very small. The ones up in the upper right are between 2 to 3 feet tall. So it varies a lot. And here's a video of just a 1-minute tour of my studio so you can get a sense for the space that I work in. I made everything in there just about. The benches, the sculpting stands, and I enjoy that part of it because I just like working in all types of media. I think it's fair to say that I have somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 individual shapes. And some of these I've had for over 10 years. I mean, when I find a piece that I know I've had for 10 or 15 years and I feel, oh, I found the sculpture that goes, and it's so exciting. Like that thing's been sitting there gathering dust forever. That's my mascot. He's 4 feet tall by 4 feet wide. If anyone wants a big bull, just let me know. And so that's my bone pile. It's never that nice. I did stage it, I have to be honest. It's more of an actual pile on a normal day. But so I mentioned that I do assemblage. And so I'm just going to talk you through a little bit of what the process looks like. This is, thank you to Sandy Cover, a good friend of mine who took the video. So I'm working and I've got that little base there that might be legs. I don't know. So I'm going to try it as legs. And now I grab a piece that looks like it might be a head. Maybe I'm going to try to put some arms in there. Maybe I'll test it as a head. No, I don't like that. Okay, so maybe I'm going to use part of that as arms. And this is actually what happens. I really just like whatever is going to happen. So I'm going to cut that thing in half so I only have half of the oval there. So it'll look like arms either pointing up or pointing down. There's a lot of heat involved. That wax is super temperature sensitive. I cracked a little bit of it there where I didn't want to crack it. And so now I'm just going to, instead of cutting the other side of the potential arm, I'm just going to break it because sometimes that happenstance adds something to the piece that I would have never, I would have messed it up if I'd have thought about it too much, right? So maybe it's arms that way. Maybe it's it's a power arm. Ooh, maybe it's a little sad. And then it broke. And thanks to Paul, I don't ever worry about when things break anymore. It's just okay, well, then I'm going to breathe new life into it. So that's one example. Another example here is this shape that I welded that flat piece on it so it would stand up as legs. I had originally sculpted that thinking it was going to be a fish, and I'll show you like that with the mouth on the left. And so I don't know, maybe it'll eventually be a fish, but I'm thinking about it now as legs. So I'm looking for a piece just to show what I was thinking about, maybe to make it a fish. I found a tail there. Okay, so maybe something like that or like that. Bust that piece off in the middle, weld it on there. Who knows? But for right now, I'm just going to think about, okay, maybe that's legs. And that's the type of piece, I might have that around for 10 years before I finally figure out what I'm going to do with it. I'll reshape it or whatever. Okay, so that piece that I have in my hand looks like it might be legs if you stand it up that way. But I try to go with the non-obvious reference. So I'm going to try that as a head. Okay, maybe that's some kind of cartoon animal with a head, with a mouth on the left. I don't know. Let's see, I've got my circle drawer there. So maybe that's an eye. I don't know. I'm just gonna fish around. There's another eye. And I'm gonna try, I have this little piece that is lovely that I thought, well, I'll just see what that looks like as a head. I mean, it's a total fail. It's not the right scale. I don't know. So I don't think I'm gonna do that. Maybe I'll try it again now that I see it from here. It looks kind of cool. I don't know. So there, again, that's a piece that looks like legs. Turn it upside down. Maybe they're antlers for an animal-like thing. Who knows? They put a neck in there. I don't know. That's not the right thing, but just so that you can get a sense for what that looks like. So one thing that I think I mentioned is that I'm working in hollow wax. And so most people, I don't actually know of any other sculptor that sculpts in hollow wax. Most people who make bronzes on a scale like this up here would have a solid piece that they then make a rubber mold for and make a wax copy, a thin wax copy. Every bronze sculpture that you ever have seen that's bigger than this is hollow on the inside for a lot of reasons, not including no one wants to haul around a 2-ton sculpture that's this big. Working with hollow wax is interesting. It's a fabrication problem. How do you make all these shapes out of essentially flat sheet brown wax? And so I've got a few videos here to show you how I work with the wax. That's the same one. I'm going to go here. So this is here. I'm going to make, and I meant to bring these pieces so I could pass them around. I'm sorry. The piece on the right here is wax. If you want to touch that at the end, whatever, if you break this, no worry. Paul would be proud of you. So you can see the big sheet there closest to us. It's about 2 feet by 2.5 feet. And I'm just going to make a little rectangular form. You'll notice that I'm not measuring. I do not usually measure anything unless I'm trying to make a rectangular base. And so I'm just going to show you how I use welding tools to weld that. The sheet of wax that I am working with has been warmed up. The studio is temperature controlled. It's about 64 degrees. And I have to, if I grabbed any of that wax without warming up, it would crack. The wax is super temperature sensitive. So here you're going to see, I'm just going to use a soldering iron with a flat tip on it to weld. I'm going to speed that up so we don't have to watch all of that. Turn it over, weld the outside. And that wax is about 1/4 of an inch thick. When I'm working with smaller pieces, sometimes I'll use a little bit thinner wax. That's as thick as you would want it, though. And honestly, even the big, huge pieces are often 1/4 of an inch thick bronzes that you've seen. So I just cut that end off, and now it's got those nasty weld marks on there. So I'm going to just smooth that out. So you can't see it very well. We'll see it in a second. That's a huge pool of wax in a wax brick. Heat that up so it gets nice and pooled up. Just slather that on there like frosting a really ugly cake. And now we've got a kind of a random-ish shaped rectangular-ish form. And that goes in the bone pile. And then, tomorrow I'll pick that up and do something else with it. Heat it up, press it with a piece of barnwood or whatever. And so it's pretty easy to make flat forms with wax, just like I did, right? All the surfaces are flat. It takes a little bit more heat and a little bit more effort to take a flat piece of wax and bend it into something that is, round in 2 directions. And I'm a geometry teacher. This shape that's not a sphere, if you squish it, that's called an ovoid. So I'm going to make an ovoid shape. You're welcome. I know you'll use that today, later on, out of a sheet of wax. And so that wax has, again, been warmed up already. It takes a considerable amount of heat to warm it up. I'm going to warm it up a little bit more. It's got to be exactly the right consistency in order to get the give that I need in order to press it into the right shape. that negative space, hold on for just 1 second. I'll go back to that. That negative shape, you see the piece that I pulled off that was the outside? Sometimes those are my favorite pieces. And as a matter of fact, the chicken legs right here, I'm going to show you working on those. The chicken legs were a negative. Imagine a piece of flat wax this big, and I cut 2 kind of symmetrical pieces out of it. And so I've got the negative. It's all together. And I like, oh, okay, well, let's try something. And so I pushed it together, folded it up this way, and it ended up looking like the bottom part of a chicken. And so I stood that up, and it sat there for a couple months, and I've been working on it a little bit recently, and then part of that is what I'm going to show you here. Let's go back. Where are we? Hold on. Oh, I'm going forward, not backward. Hold on for just a second. So this is making the curved shape. That's the negative that I'm talking about, what's in my hand right there. I'll take those and texture them and bend them around and just see what kind of happens. So now I'm pressing that together, and instead of stretching it, you can easily envision stretching wax. Well, the beauty of this particular type of wax is called microcrystalline wax. It's what you make bronzes with, is that it has a lot of give, and so you can push it together. So I'm actually making the outside diameter of that smaller by just jamming it together like this. Go around one more time. So in some senses, it's kind of like working with clay, except it's got to be the right temperature, and you don't have to take care of it. It doesn't dry out and break, in between working with it. This today and tomorrow, I can just set it aside. So I'm just pushing it up, finishing it a little bit more with my hands. And now, I don't know why, but I got the feeling, I was thinking circle right in the middle, and so I'm just going to cut a circle out for no other reason than it felt like the right thing to do. Heat that. You don't heat those razor blades up and you end up cutting yourself. Honestly, I think I've had stitches in my hands like 7 times I haven't done it recently, so I must be getting better. So that doesn't look like it fits together very well. And so instead of flattening it out, decided I wanted it to tilt in a little bit at the top. So I'm going to cut that gnarly edge off with a little bit of a taper so that it ends up being thinner at the top, like a proper oval. Now that is holding itself together just because that wax is a little bit warm. Otherwise, it wouldn't stick together like it just did. I'm just going to tack it together with a welding iron. I wish it went that fast, really. It doesn't. And so there's a form. And then the last thing that I do is, oh no, I've got 2 more short videos. This is a brief video on texturing. So I really have come to love natural happenstance textures. That piece that I'm going to rub on right now is a piece of cool wax, and I've warmed that other wax up, and that's a pretty basic texture that I use. Just rub that on there, and then if you keep rubbing it, you can get it to build up. And that's a very nice happenstance kind of texture. You can make it as tall as you want. If you keep rubbing, you let it cool and then rub over the top of it some more. Here I'm going to do a little bit of texturing with digging tools. That's very much like working with clay, whatever. Then a few straight lines, just like working with clay. Those are clay tools, actually, those couple there. So I'm going to set that aside and show you a little bit. Oh, yeah, I don't like anything to look like totally smooth, so I'm going to warm up a little piece of wax, just rub some stuff over the edge that makes for a really nice kind of variation in the sheen of the bronze after you pour it in bronze and patina it. I'm going to do on that oval, the ovoid that I just made. Oh, no, that's not it. This is a different shape, a different ovoid-ish shape. It's got a point on it. Looks a little bit like a pear. So just to show you, you can make much deeper textures. Whatever. It's really like frosting. I have become really good at frosting cakes. So I've got a little rough, deep texture on the top there. I'm making a little more smooth texture on the bottom. We're going to, on the We'll flip it over here in just a second. I'm going to use a tool that actually has textured teeth in it for the back side, just to, again, show you different ways that you can achieve whatever you want. So that has grooves in the tool, so it digs grooves in as I'm spreading it out. And then once that cools, those textures on the piece I just did are a little bit shiny. You'll notice the other one is not shiny at all, that flat piece. And I found that if I take the torch and go over top, because the high parts are closer to the flame, they will pool a little bit sooner. And having that sheen on there makes it really nice for patina. Having some texture on there makes the patina rich. Having those highlights, that makes it easier to get shiny highlights, which is nice because no matter what color it is, somehow I don't want people to forget it's actually made out of metal. And that is helpful with that. And I brought you can see the little sculpting stand there with the gnarly looking chicken body on it. It's not my favorite piece of the moment, but I'm going to show you a little bit about how I was working with that. Just to explain what I said, I built the tops of these legs. I actually built those on, but every other part of this, including a really cool tail that comes out like this, that I pulled off because I had to work with it back there. That whole form came from just folding that negative shape up. I mean, and I bent the legs, but those legs were on there as a result of the negative that I folded. So it all really happened on accident. I'm not sure yet whether it was a happy accident, but I'm going to spend a second here showing you how I kind of fart around with shapes if I'm not satisfied with them. I really don't like the curve. It doesn't look like the breast of a chicken. Some friends of mine said they might be interested in a chicken, so whatever. I'm going to try and make a chicken. That thing, the breast needs to protrude more. It's not the right angle, and so I'm going to heat that up. And so because there are two pieces that come up there, that neck is almost solid wax because they're so thin. And so I've got to heat it up, and it took about 5 minutes of heating on and off. Heat, let it set, heat, let it set. I'm not going to have you watch all 5 minutes of it. We're just going to blah, blah, blah. This is about 2.5 minutes worth of heating. You can see it pulls up a little bit. I want to be able to force it back. So I'm testing it now. It's not moving yet. And so I'm going to, that was 16 times speed for about 2 more minutes. And so now it's the right temperature to move. And so that's a piece of old barnwood in my hand. I love old barnwood as a tool. I try not to, when I can use tools that are not made for the job, it's better. It introduces happenstance and forms and shapes, directions, or emotion that I wouldn't otherwise use. So I'm just going to use that to press it back instead of doing it with my bare hands, because I'll get something different than I would calculate. And the less I can calculate while I'm doing this, the better. So I like that a little bit better, but it's still not being able to push it back as far as I want. So I'm going to heat it up some more, go back at it with the heated up. The only reason I heat the barnwood up is so it doesn't stick to it would stay stuck, or, it would rip the texture off or whatever. So it's got to be warm. Now I'm pushing it way back. That's a little bit better. I got it protruding the way I want. Just whatever. Now I really wasn't sure how I was going to resolve the neck. I'm still not. I don't even know if that piece will last, if I'll finish that piece, but it doesn't really matter to me. To me, this is about the process. This is the part of it that I love. I'm just farting around to see what happens. You can see that as that thing spins, you can see there's a little bit of motion in the legs, like he's tilted and walking a little bit. I've been working a little bit more at trying to put motion into my sculptures. When I initially started sculpting, I was doing more totem-esque pieces. And so anyway, I've been kind of playing with that a little bit. So now all I'm going to do is use that big pool of wax there and fill that in the back. The angle's not right, or the taper is not quite right. So I'm just going to play with that for a second. Yeah, come on, Jeff. Get a little smaller spatula, work that in, and there. Now that looks a little different to me. It still needs to protrude more, but I can get the protrusion, I think, if I push it, just curve it back now. because the front is a little bit more where I wanted it. So that's what that looks like. And that is how I make art, the original waxes. I'll talk from here on out about making bronzes, which is interesting about making bronzes is you get done with the art and you're about a quarter of the way there. There's so much work that goes into actually turning it into a bronze. But before we do that, are there any questions at all about anything that you've seen? Go ahead.
So when you pour the bronze in your mold, how warm is it? Because you don't lose that texture that you put on.
I will talk about that in the bronze process, but you don't lose the texture. A properly made bronze mold will pick up fingerprints. You don't lose any texture if it's done right. Not at all. It's a good question. Yeah, people don't realize that. But any other questions at all? Again, I don't know anyone else that sculpts this way. It's kind of time intensive having to build the shapes, but it keeps me, my wife always knows where I am. Keeps me out of trouble. So once you have the original wax, what you do then, normally, most people have somebody else make a rubber mold for each section of the art. So for a piece, hold on for a second. The scale of this. You'd probably need 4, 5, or 6 small rubber molds that would fit around that and then be pulled off and you put wax in them to make the copy. That piece that I just pointed at was cast in 5 different, I cast it in 5 different pieces, even though I wasn't making a rubber mold. You have to do that because you've got to have mold material on the inside to keep it hollow. And unless you can access the inside, you can't put mold material in there. So anyway, steps 2 and 3, I don't do. But that's normal bronzing is you use the rubber mold. Step 3, use rubber molds to make a hollow wax copy. I have hollow wax copies, so I just start with step 4, and I use the wax copies to make a ceramic mold, which is the mold that you pour bronze into. Question?
You don't make multiples at all?
I have made a few multiples. This cute little dog here seems to be a crowd favorite. I had a mold made of that. I have molds made for 3 or 4 pieces. Including Ellie. That piece was commissioned, so that's a 3rd edition, 2nd or 3rd edition, the piece that's in the gallery. But other than that, I don't. And so if something goes wrong with the bronze casting, the original's gone. There's no getting it back. Though if you do it the normal way, you still have the original. They just pull another copy of that piece of it because they've got a rubber mold for it. So anyway, step 4, make ceramic molds. Step 5, pour bronze into them. Step 6, cut it all apart and weld the sections together. And then step 7, patina. That's patination is the process of coloring metal. And so I'll show you a little bit of that. So these are waxes. You can see, again, I use an exterior structure. I don't, did I talk about armatures? I was practicing this in my head earlier. And I talked to myself a lot about armatures. Most sculptors use armatures, which are structures inside, made of wire or whatever, some other material, so that you can build the sculptures around it. Because I can't have anything on the inside, my supports are external. So I build these stands that I can use for various size sculptures to hold them up so that they don't droop or shift or change location as I'm finishing that. Finishing them, sometimes it's super important to have them still so that I can make a minor adjustment here or there. That's what those wooden structures are. Again, more waxes on wooden structures. That's my pail in the barn. I really need somebody to buy that piece so I can pour it. It's so big, I probably will never be able to pour it, but it's going to stand in there forever. So this is that piece is called Good Morning Mom because it looks like a kid with bedhead, I thought. Hi, Mom. And so that it's about 3.5 feet tall. The hair is about 3.5 feet wide. You can see in the center there, I've cut the hair off. You can see that head is indeed hollow. Because of the volume of hair, I had to cut the hair into 3 different sections and cast it. So there were three sections cast separately of hair that are then welded together and then welded on the head. And that piece on the right is 1/3 of the hair. And you can see the red wax under there. When you pour bronze, you need a funnel system you need a funnel to pour the bronze into, and you need paths to take the bronze from the funnel to the piece itself. It's called a sprue system. And so that red there is the beginning of a sprue system for that piece. And I'll show you some other pieces here, and when you see the red wax, you'll know that's additional stuff for sprueing. So this is a piece, I think the Day of the Big Dance is currently in bronze on the street in Chelsea for a year. I'm excited about that. And I showed you just so that you can see the head. I cut the lips off, cut the hat off in the center there. And then I took that piece and flipped it over. That's what the inside of that looks like. And sometimes that involves, in order to get that hollow on the inside, I mean, I do sculpted sheets of wax, so it's always hollow-ish, but sometimes because I build things up or whatever, I've got to go in and scrape the wax from the inside out so that I've got a pretty consistent wall thickness of about 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch, because then the bronze will behave the way you want it to behave when it's cooling down. So these are some sculptures on sprue systems. If you look here, I forget I have this little pointer. So this and this are the same piece. This and this are the same piece from two different angles. So if you look at, this is a little bit easier to see. There's a head here. The legs are down here. It's got two eyes, and it's open and back. So this is hair-ish. That's open and back. The face is open and back. The legs are not open and back because they're open from the underside. So the mold material can get in from underneath. And if you look underneath it, these four brown blobs here are the funnels. That's where we'll pour the bronze in. And so then these red pathways carry the bronze to the piece. And so one thing that people don't know much about the bronze fabrication process is how much work it involves. When this thing is cast, all those extra pieces of wax are on the bronze, and they've all got to come off. And if it's on the outside of the piece where there's texture, you've got to fix the texture. It's called chasing. It's a super time-intensive process, especially with the complicated textures that I use to make a weld disappear. And I think I've got a picture of that at some point. So these are going to these are forms that are ready. They're sprued up pieces, and they're ready to be dipped into ceramic mold material to build the ceramic bronze mold.
What's the material of the red?
It's all wax. It's just it's a cheaper wax. It's stiffer. So it works very, very differently, but yeah, it's all wax because it all needs to burn out of the mold. Just a few more, you asked about replicas. So there's the replica of the dog. I'll tell you a story about the dog. I think we've got a second for this. This is the dog here. You see the head, the ears droop down, the jowls droop down. This piece right here, this is about the happenstance nature of how I work. I was trying to make a base, trying to come up with interesting bases. Rather than just, I put them on wood, whatever. And so I took a flat piece of wax and I got it super warm and put it over a rectangle. So it drooped down like a tablecloth with the edges kind of out like this. And I decided that was just totally ridiculous as a base, but I liked the piece. And so I hung it on a nail lengthwise. And I didn't used to have a temperature controlled studio, so it would get hot in summer. And that piece that looked like this, everything drooped down like this. And I thought, oh my goodness, that looks like a dog. And so that's where that dog came from. Happened again, totally by accident. I love that part of it. There's the dog again. That's just the process of putting sprues on. These are my two handsome sons. And that is for my current 14 pieces. Those are all the molds sprued up, ready to be taken to the foundry. I used to make the molds at home. I don't do that anymore. I also don't pour the bronze at home anymore for the last 2 years. So a buddy of mine owns a foundry, and I trade him my labor for bronze pouring, which works out really well for me. And so that's what it looks like, all that work. And so these are old pictures from when I used to make the molds myself. So I've got this here. You can see I was using Dixie cups as funnels or solo cups. That's a piece is sprued up, and I'm just dipping it into this wet silica material. When I'm working, I really should have a mask on here. Sorry, OSHA. I've got a mask on here. What you do is you put wet material on it and then pour a fine sand over top of that, a super fine silica sand. Then you do another coat of that and then a super fine silica sand. Then you put another coat and you build that up with coarser sand. So there are 2 or 3 or 4 different coarsenesses of sand, and the coarser sand makes the mold strong enough to retain the heat of the bronze, and the really fine sand is what captures the fingerprints. It's so fine that it's a powder essentially. So that's just in process. That mold is not all the way done. It needs a few more layers, but you can see the sprue system coming up the back. And so now we're assuming all the molds are done. We're going to pour bronze. This is my homemade bronze foundry. The question was, how hot does it have to be? We pull it from the furnace at 2100 degrees. It's so hot that if you dropped that, it would literally burn the feet off out from underneath who was ever standing next to it. And so it's dangerous. Yeah, I made sure my kids ran through it a few times before we did it. And so this is a sand pit standing up. Those molds that's a different type of mold. It's got a rectangular top. The funnels come off the bottom. Those molds have been heated up to 1400 degrees because if you've ever cracked a glass vessel because you put hot water in it, that's exactly what I'm doing. And the thing that makes it crack is the temperature difference. If you had warmed the cup up before you put the hot water in it, it wouldn't have cracked. And so here we warm those molds up, and you can see the big white thing hanging in the background. It's like a raku kiln, but I used it to burn the wax out. I don't know if there's a better picture of it here, but we use that bigger kiln to heat the molds up to 1400 degrees, and then it's go. Everything now is time sensitive because you've got to get the bronze in there before the molds cool down. And so this is a super anxious part of the process. You can see 2 of us have aluminized clothing on. That's because when you pull the bronze out, it gives off so much radiant heat that you can get sunburn from it. And it's way too hot to get close to, and so that helps reflect the heat as well. This is the pouring process. I have a little problem, and I know there are a few people here that are familiar with the process. This disc here is not supposed to be stuck to the bottom of the crucible. That's supposed to be in the foundry furnace, but it worked anyway, and we're pouring bronze right out behind our garage. Pours out like water. These are some older pieces here. This is the mold actually that I showed you that I was making. These are some older molds. You can see the yellow spots. We always let kids come up and throw a penny in there and watch it burn. It's kind of interesting. So I like to see that. So this is the result of all those pieces in the picture photograph with my sons. Those are all the pieces that resulted from that bronze pour. And so they now all have to be put back together. The piece, let me see, the one here, the one that I pointed at before with the oval head is right here. So here's the base. This is the neck coming up for that piece. It's got, you can see there's sprue here, sprue here, sprue here. All that has to be trimmed down and trimmed off. This ovoid head is cut into 3 pieces so that we could get mold material on the inside. There's the part with the lips on it. This is the top part, and those 2 right here. These pieces here were cast separately just for convenience sake, and so they had to be welded back on there right here. Once you get all those pieces, then you've got to weld them together. And I was blessed to have a father who worked in industry, and so I've been around machine shops my whole life. And I had done a little bit of welding, but I've since become a pretty skilled TIG welder with bronze. That's the process that you use to stick the pieces of metal together. This piece is called Whale Rider. there's what the head ends up looking like. You can see there's a bead of weld all the way around that face. There will be weld here to hold the front and back of the face together. And you can see this is called whale rider because this is the whale that little boy sits on. And there are all these welds here that I've ground down, but then need to be chased. So if you look really closely at this texture, you can see that's a pretty deep texture. I did that with that tool that has the grooves in it. And so that weld goes right over top of those. So then I've got to go back in with little teeny tiny grinding tools and chisels and whatever else to make that texture consistent across the weld, to make it disappear. That's called chasing. And it is, I mean, sometimes it's like jewelry work. My wife keeps saying, you know, you shouldn't make those textures that are hard to chase. And I just don't even think about the making it part. I just like make something that I think is going to be cool. And then whatever, I just live through the hellishness of having to chase. Chasing this weld around here, around that up the side, probably took 6 hours. So it's time intensive. This is a little bit of chasing here. I'm using a little, it's called a pencil grinder. This is actually a Dremel tool with a pencil grinder attachment. And so using a very small grinder to chase some of the weld out of the bottom of the elephant. This is actually Ellie, the one that's in the gallery. Here, Ellie is clamped up. I do this part of it. I don't have a studio for this part of it. My brothers have been very gracious to me. They own a machine shop in Richland. And so when I do my welding, the left part, the chasing, I do at home, but all the welding I do with their equipment at their shop. And so since I'm a teacher, I have time in the summer. I usually set aside a week or two and get some welding done. And you can see there's a weld there. That one's a little bit easier to chase because it doesn't have too much texture around it. But even these light textures, stuff is hard to match. You've got to, you know, little teeny tiny chisels and punches and whatever to make that disappear. It's a wee bit of a tedious task. There's the bull right here. I've got him clamped up because I needed to do some work on this end, some welding work on this end. Turning it upside down. This is a little fixture that I made. So you've got to be able to bolt these things down. And so this is a fixture that I made. This is the bottom of a hoof, There are 2 more hoofs underneath this part of it. And it holds that bolt so that it's perpendicular to the feet. And then I suspend a nut, put a nut on the bolt and use that and weld it so that I know that when I try to screw that thing perpendicular up from the bottom, they'll actually go in perpendicularly instead of at angles. So, you know, there's a lot of engineering involved in this, you know, making something. Paul Flickinger said, you know, painting and sculpting are 2 different things, because in sculpting, you got to make things stand up. And in short, that is the challenge. You know, this is part of the challenge of that, is you've got to make something that stands free, that will be sturdy. That actually has superstructure in the neck that I did not show, that got welded, that is welded in there to make sure that even if a kid were to hang on it, it's not problematic. So most big sculptures, if they've got appendages, will have some kind of stainless steel superstructure inside to make sure that they can bear the weight of kids and whatever else. Patination. So if I go back, well, you can see this surface right here, these have all been sandblasted. Bronze doesn't look like this right out of the kiln. Sandblasting is a process of using a heavy-duty Air Force squirt gun with sand, different types or grains of sand, depending on what finish you want. And so these have all been sandblasted so that I can see the seams. And then once I grind them off, I'll sandblast it again so that when I'm doing the chasing, I can see exactly what it looks like. So this surface here has been changed. Here, you can see a weld right there. That weld would be right here, except for here I've chased it. So I sandblast it to make sure that the weld is disappeared. And I forget so that color on the left, this is sandblasted bronze. If you left that thing outside, it would change color pretty immediately. It does not take long to change color a little bit. So that is not a common state for bronze. And so patination usually involves a lot of heat. Most chemicals that you use to patina are applied on heated bronze and heated while you're applying it. So usually between 120 and 160 or 70 degrees, depending on what chemicals you're working with. And it's a lot of different steps. So this is step 0. This is a black undercoating done with liver of sulfur. And so that can take a little while to get the consistent black. And once you get the black on there, then I spend, in this case here for this sculpture, probably about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, because of getting inside the hair, sanding or abrading most of the black off. Because what you want is the depth in a patina. And so in the crevices, you want the black, and on the top surfaces, you want way less black. That gives a very refined kind of patina that you can't get otherwise. This is one set of coloration, and this is another set of coloration, different chemicals. I've actually changed the patina of that piece, but at one point it was two colors. I had a little bit of green here and a little bit of green in the hair, but I changed that. This is another one. This is the liver of sulfur. This is abraded. I've abraded the liver of sulfur off of it. And so you put all that black on, you take 95% of it off. And then this is mostly a chemical called ferric nitrate. It's got a few other things in it, and this stuff is all applied hot. And I'll show you, we don't need to watch this. We've got time to watch the whole thing. This is a quick video. It's about 5 hours worth of patinaing to patina this piece. And I think I've compressed it to a minute, 2 minutes. This piece has a contemporary patina. It's got a lot of chemicals in it here. It doesn't have liver of sulfur on it. I did not make it black. I'm using ferric nitrate with a little bit of green in it. So you get a kind of a brown green. And you've got every once in a while, you might see a blue thing in my hand. I'm using a temperature gauge to make sure that I'm staying within a range of give or take 20 or 30 degrees. So spraying again, that's a squirt bottle. Now I've got a little bit more green in with the chemical. As you can see, the brown aspect of that is the chemical underlaying the green pigment that's in there. And so now, this is the first time I had done this. I've really never done one that was patinaed this way. It's just the best video I have, but I'm dry brushing highlights on it. Then I went back and sprayed a little bit more brown on it. Keep going, keep going, keep going. We're getting close. Let me skip ahead here. This is just one last coat. I'm putting a little bit of ferric nitrate on it, and then that's the brown chemical, and then heat it up. And then that's done. After this part of the process, you let it cool down, and then for outdoor sculptures, I think do I have that? Hold on for a second. They're always finished with lacquer. You spray lacquer over them, that protects the patina, and then you put wax, paste wax, a really, really light couple coats of paste wax over top of that, and that helps the patina maintain. And then if you're good about it, every 3 or 4 years you re-wax over top of it, and that will maintain the color of the patina. And that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions at all? Go ahead.
The sculptures that you have placed in public places, have they had you come back and maintain them?
So I rent them. Those are competitive exhibits. I've been in several of them. I've actually been in Chelsea for the last 5 years, and so they rent it for $1,000 for the year. So I go and install it. After a year, I get it back. And if it needs maintenance, I do it in between. But yeah, I've got some pieces at Petter I'll probably do a little bit of maintenance on. They've been outside there. I don't know if you're familiar with Petter Gallery in Saugatuck, but I believe it's the nicest gallery in this region of the state. If you haven't been there, you should go there. It's actually in Douglas, just outside of Saugatuck. That's where my work is. And I've got 6 or 7 pieces outdoors as well as a collection of pieces inside. All right. Well, if you want to come up and take a quick look, I think I have enough for everyone. I've got some postcards up here. If you're interested in following me on Instagram or Facebook, that would be fabulous. And if you want to just touch the wax and see what that feels like, it's a little tacky, feel free. I really, really appreciate the opportunity to do this. Thank you.